Survivor Week 7. It's a good one. I really like this one. It's probably one of my favorites of the season, actually. And there's not really a particular reason why. I just really enjoy this week's episode of Survivor. And there's just something I really got to say at the end of this video here. But this season's just been very refreshing compared to seasons 41 and 42. I didn't like 41. Really hated 41. 42 was better, but it was still not that great. And those are the two most very vibrant recent seasons in my mind that just really come to mind. It's just very fresh, and unfortunately fresh, because those seasons were just so bad. So getting a season like 43 is actually quite nice. And we start out this episode with, we're officially in the merge. The merge has officially happened now, and we can get back into the individual game finally. We're not just these tribes that are maybe one tribe losing like Vessi all the time or something like that. No, we're just one big tribe, and we're to the merge. So we got an interesting challenge to start out this episode, really. So when they get to the challenge, they're actually divided up into teams in a way, like we've seen with reward challenges, where a reward challenge will kind of split up the whole tribe, and they'll give us two tribes again for the challenge, and then one half will go on the reward. This time we're doing something very different. This time around we're doing a pair up. Like if you do in school, if you remember pairing up with your partner or your friend in school, it's kind of like that situation here for this individual immunity challenge. So the tribe ended up getting a letter at the beginning of the episode saying that they're going to have to choose their partners for the challenge. So they all chose rocks, and they chose their partners that way for the challenge, and then they went into it that way. And so it's a pair of two for most of the challenge, and there's 3 parts to the challenge. It's basically one big normal one, but they split it up, and they split them into 2 teams each until the last one. So the way it goes is the first 4 teams of, there was 6 teams or something like that. The first 4 teams of 2 to make it through the first stage, which was this mud net thing. It was very interesting to see that. 4 teams got to go through, and then the second stage is 2 pairs. So 2 pairs of the 4 remaining teams make it through. And once you hit that second stage and you get through the second stage, then you have 4 people left. And then at that last final stage of stage 3 of the challenge, we have an official individual immunity challenge. So it's not like we start out with a bunch of things laid out for each individual person to have this concentration type challenge. It's more of there are 4 stations for 4 people. So 4 people really only got to compete for an individual immunity challenge in the end. They all competed, but as an individual actual challenge for an individual immunity, it was 4 people, and it ended up coming down to Gabler and Cody in the end. 2 lost the challenge, ended up being Gabler and Cody, and it was a long challenge. So it lasted 30 something minutes or 40. It was around there, and it ended up doubling the last time they did this bucket challenge, where they have to hold on to this bar with a rope, and they basically have to hold 25% of their body weight in this bucket, and they can't let the bucket drop and hit the tile. And we ended up having this long-standing challenge with Gabler and Cody, and it was the most interesting part of the challenge for sure. And honestly, this challenge and just the last few weeks have really made me like Gabler. Gabler is really becoming a favorite of mine. Cody was a favorite of mine early on in the season, but we haven't really gotten much with him. I still like him and his character in the show, but honestly, they're not doing a whole lot with him. They're not showing a lot with him. I don't know what that necessarily means for his game going forward. If they're just gonna kind of keep him quiet, and then suddenly he's going to rise and make it to the end or something. But Cody really hasn't had much screen time, but Gabler has had a lot of screen time in the last few weeks, and he is definitely becoming a favorite of mine. He wasn't really a favorite towards the beginning. I just didn't really like him that much. He was just kind of there, but after this episode, I don't know why, it wasn't this whole sob story thing afterwards and the story he gave after the challenge. It just, the last episode with the whole Ellie and Gabler thing, and then this episode and just his little stories he would give through every minute of the challenge. I don't know. I just kind of like him. He's kind of fun to watch. Gabler is a fun guy to watch on the screen, and I'm rooting for him. I'm rooting for him to win now. If Cody doesn't make it, I'm rooting for Gabler. And honestly, I think I'm rooting for Gabler more than Cody at this point. I'm really liking Gabler at this point in the game. Maybe that'll change next week. Who knows what they'll do with week 8, where they maybe show a ton of Cody, and Cody has a lot to do in week 8. Maybe he's the one on the chopping block or something. I don't know. But Gabler has had a lot of screen time the last few weeks, and I've enjoyed it. It's been a really cool player to watch, and it's just been entertaining. That is amazing. I really am just so happy that this season is very entertaining, because the last 2 seasons have been kind of just nauseating at some points, or just really boring. Season 42 was decent. It was okay. We had the one big woke disaster on the tribal council that kind of really just put a damper on the rest of the season for me personally. And I didn't like the winner either of 42 or 41 even. And those seasons were just bad. They just were not fun to watch. And I'm really enjoying 43. So basically, the rest of the episode is obviously everyone scrambling and trying to figure out what to do. And there's this interesting dynamic where James ends up finding this bottle at the water well. And the water well, people go there to get their water and whatever, and he just unfortunately happened to be there with like 4 other people. And he's like, what is that in the well? There's this little bottle floating around in the well. He picks it out. Obviously you can't hide that when there's 4 people standing around the water getting water, looking right in the well. So obviously people are going to know that he has an advantage. He found a clue to an advantage, and the advantage is the knowledge is power. So we've seen this before. It's where someone can ask someone else at tribal council for their idol or advantage or whatever, and then they can take it if that person has an idol or advantage. It has to be very specific, and if they do have that thing that they asked for, they get to have that idol, and they get to use it as their own. They get to take it from them, and that is kind of what the knowledge of power advantage is. And I mean, I'm fine with it. I think it's kind of cool. It definitely created an interesting dynamic here in the last half here of the episode with James. And the thing is with this episode and with what happened to James, you can't really avoid it. Like, everybody found out immediately that he had some sort of advantage. A lot of people assumed it was the knowledge of power, and they ended up having like this big swap with their allies. So everyone has their alliances, and everyone is kind of starting to get the word that it's the knowledge of power. So the knowledge of power means that they can have their idol stolen or their advantage stolen. So to possibly avoid their idols getting taken, everybody went to their different alliances and ended up giving their idols to an ally member or an advantage to an ally member. And they did that to kind of confuse things a little bit, kind of jumble it up a little bit, so you don't really know who has what at the actual tribal council. I thought that was really interesting, actually, because people handing over idols and advantages in Survivor has always been kind of tricky, because some people, you just don't know who you can trust when you hand over your idol, your immunity idol, to somebody else in the game. And we've seen disasters with it before, and it just kind of struck me interesting, like in this episode, because so many people did it. So many people did it. I know Cody did it. A few other people did it as well. I'm trying to keep track of all the idols and advantages, but Cody definitely gave his, I think, to Owen or something, and he gave his idol to him to hold on to, so James can't necessarily take it, because apparently James knew that Cody had the idol. So that's just kind of an interesting dynamic I really liked in this episode, actually, and it was created by the whole advantage, these different types of advantages and the knowledge of power, and I just really like to see that type of gameplay. It was fun. It was very fun to watch. And then obviously we didn't really know who to vote out throughout the whole last half. People were just kind of scrambling. It was more about James and him finding that advantage and not knowing necessarily what to do with it. People didn't know what to do, how to be safe and avoid him taking their advantage or idol. So it was kind of the bigger focus there in the last half. But ultimately, we ended up at Tribal Council, much bigger tribal now. Obviously, you need a lot more votes. It's the merged tribe. And it was like a big 3-way tie for a lot of the votes between Dwight, Ryan, and James. And it ended up being Dwight. Dwight was the one voted out. Now, I don't really know. I think that was just kind of like a random blindside vote. I don't think it was really brought up for any specific reason. I'd have to look back on it again. But Dwight was the one voted out. I honestly, I would consider it a blindside. I don't know if he even really knew he would be the one on the chopping block. But yeah, I really enjoyed this episode. I actually thought it was very fascinating, very fun to watch, and very entertaining. And this whole season's been a lot better than 42 and 41. 40 So season 40 was like amazing, by the way. I don't talk about it that much. I kind of started covering Survivor as like pretty recently, but like, season 40 was incredible. It was the winners at war. It was some really really fun stuff to watch, and then we went to 41 and 42 where it was like a complete 180 on the game of Survivor and all the woke stuff that they were doing in the game of Survivor, and it was just exhausting to watch them go to every tribal council almost in 41 and just preach at us for nonstop whatever nonsense they wanted to spew instead of actually playing the game. And we just haven't really had those moments yet in this season. Now, I could be jinxing it. I could be really eating it next week and eating my words next week and just kind of sitting right here and making a rant video about it. I don't really know. Hopefully not, because I'm really enjoying this season. I think it's really fun. I think CBS has really started to realize, even if there was like some major woke moments, if it doesn't happen at Tribal, maybe you can kind of cut it out, focus on the game more, and actually make it interesting for everybody to watch and not just one small demographic of people who enjoy that type of weird woke preaching that they like to do. And that's kind of my big thing here with this episode. I'm just finding myself really enjoying it. And I'm finding myself just realizing that they're not preaching to us. They're showing us the game of Survivor. It's different. It's new. It's interesting at some points. There's some things I didn't like, I haven't liked so far. But there are interesting new twists and things they do that are fascinating. And I'm really enjoying the gameplay too. It's all really fun. And I'm glad that I'm having fun with Survivor again, because after 41 started with that whole shebang of whatever, come on in guys, all that stuff, I was ready to just walk away from Survivor. I've been like a casual long-time viewer for a while now, and I was ready to walk away from it. I made a video a while ago about it, and then I've kind of covered Survivor mostly whenever they had a disaster. This season, I jumped on board to make some content about it, and I'm glad so, because it's been a really good season. So hopefully week 8 is just as good as week 7, and hopefully we continue to have a pretty solid season, because I'm really, really enjoying it. And I'm rooting for Gabler now. I really like Gabler.